I was just complaining with friend of the show, Landon Tengwall, before we got going, that I spent like 10 hours on Sunday reviewing Penn State, Wisconsin. We're returning the page. It's Ohio State week. All that, flush it. Next thing. We are going to talk a little bit about Wisconsin here to start the show, but really today is all about what is the status of Penn State's three-star players that were injured against Wisconsin, and what are the ramifications of that coming this week. We'll talk about that between the lines. Of course, we'll get to your questions, which is fueling our preview of Penn State, Ohio State at the end of the show. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Our experts are Nate Bauer and Sean Fitz of Blue White Illustrated, two of the most veteran reporters leading the industry in coverage for Penn State football. So, gentlemen, welcome to the show. Nate, I have not had a chance to talk to you about Penn State and Wisconsin. So give me your overall thoughts as we get into the show. What did you think now that you had a little time to reflect on that particular performance from the Nittany Lions?
You know, I hate to do this because I don't like adversity as a word to describe sports. They got through some adversity, I would say. You know, I thought from the get-go that was a game where Penn State showed that it had better players than Wisconsin. There weren't highlight guys on Wisconsin's side of the ball.
Hasn't that been really the case all year? That Penn State has showed they've got the better players, and yet somehow the game is close into the third, late into the fourth, or early into the fourth.
Yeah, there's just these, USC I thought had some players on the offensive side of the ball. But what I would say is, Wisconsin got itself into more advantageous situations than Penn State did, at least in terms of field position, penalties, you name it. There were different things that kind of got in Penn State's way. Julian Fleming, obviously, that drop was kind of critical in terms of game flow.
Mm-hmm. So another week of a slow start that could have been prevented by a big play that was, right, Nate?
One play.
One play. And so you just, there the fake punt that wasn't a fake punt, right? Where the guy just ad-libbed. All of those things put Penn State into a tighter game than it would have been otherwise. But ultimately for the situations that unfolded, losing Drew Allar, losing Anthony Dokoh, losing Dani Dennis-Sutton, right? Like Dani's kind of the less impactful, just given the quality of players that they have at that position. But yeah, for Bo Pribula, obviously, and Nolan Rucci to step in there and make things work offensively, a lot of credit for them.
Yeah, it was a week where if you could pick a position that is most important to Penn State and generally football success, they got hit in 3 of the 4 top positions in football: quarterback, defensive end, and tackle. So, keep your head on a swivel, cornerback, because apparently it's spooky season for that. Like an Auto Styling says, really appreciate you guys with a hefty donation to the channel. That is very kind of you. Thank you so much for being here. Like an Auto Styling is a regular here on the show. Doesn't always participate, but we always know they are there. So thank you so much for being here on the show. Fitz, we had a chance to talk post-game. Anything that you thought differently now that you've had some time to reflect? I don't know if you watched the game back at all or, checked out any of my film breakdowns at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. 50% off right now. We'll get to the promo in just a second. But Fitz, anything from the game that you think about that you want to bring up and kind of chew on here to start the show?
Yes, as always with Nate, I'm going to bring it back to golf here. So Nate and I play quite frequently together. Nate, so I go, we're on 17, and I hook it left as I usually do, and I go into the woods. The safe play, of course, punch back out of the fairway, give yourself a shot, at 3. What do? I don't
smack
do
it.
Yeah, you just go for it.
Yeah, I just go for it. So it's called compounding mistakes in golf. And Penn State, if you look at their first quarter plays in the last 2 games, it's what happens. It just kind of adds up. It's sort of a miniature train wreck there, as you saw the offensive pass interference in the USC game takes points off the board, leads to a field goal. This game, the Julian Fleming drop, and then we don't even talk about the fumble on the snap. Like we talk about the Fleming drop because it's huge, and absolutely is. I mean, you can't skirt that one under the rug. But the next play should be a quarterback sneak for a first down, and they fumbled that. By the way, Wisconsin recovered that ball. Apparently, I just learned that last night. I just thought it was a turnover on downs, but no, it was one of those things where these little, just a tick off, a play here, a drop here, a penalty here, is really impeding the full progress of this team, because we know so well that when Penn State gets up, that's when their defense can play its defense. And what we've been seeing the last couple of weeks is, kind of putting yourself behind the 8 ball, and you have the talent to dig out of it. I don't know that you're going to have that luxury this week. So got to avoid compounding mistakes. Got to just pitch out into the fairway and go for it and take your medicine there. So I think that's really what we're looking at with this team is a beat away from doing some really great things. And I know it's been a frustrating watch for a lot of people, but doing some really great things. But at the end of the day, they're 7-0, and there's something to be said for that as well. Defensively, I keep seeing about the adjustments made at halftime and things like that. But T. Frank, we've talked about this before. I don't know that I didn't see anything, and being in the right position is an adjustment. I think it's flowing into the game and doing some things naturally. And I will say, I definitely commend the defense for carrying, for carrying the load when they knew that there was a bridge to be crossed to get Bo Prabula comfortable in the game. You didn't necessarily expect that to be a pick 6, and that's awesome that it was. But they really did a great job in stifling what was a okay Badger offense, and there's nothing special about it. But they got the initiative to step back on the front foot, and that put everybody in position to win. And that's what kind of flipped field position. That's what kind of flipped the game. So certainly some high marks for Tom Allen, not necessarily for the adjustments, but for getting guys in the right spots in the right positions.
So the interesting thing is I have not noticed a tactical difference necessarily in Penn State's defense from the first half to the second half. I would say if there has been one thing, maybe they're slightly more aggressive against the run. They will run blitz. And I'm thinking specifically of, I started looking into this in the UCLA game. But to me, the difference is the score is close at halftime. So teams that are playing Penn State that know they've got this pass rush and they know that they are the underdog in the situation, they do the whole, hey, it's 0-0, it's halftime, let's reset, this is the start of the game. So they want to get back to trying to reestablish the line of scrimmage. And coming out of halftime, just don't do that if you're against Penn State's defense. That has been the worst plan. And then when teams decide, I know, but here's the thing, Fitz, it's on film. Like if you're a coach, it's right there. Don't run against them on first down to start the third quarter, because it's going to be 3rd and 9 and you're going to be screwed.
Luke Fickell said it right off the top in his press conference. He said, we were trying to get them to the fourth quarter and basically suffocate and drown them and hope that you can come, you can be the one that crawls out of the water at that point. They didn't have the horses to get that done. And, you said they blitz more in the second half. That's natural when you start to get the lead. Like, that's when you see the true scope of what this
specifically.
But that's when you see the true scope of what this defense can be, is when they get a lead and when they can be aggressive. I think Tom Allen was a head coach, so he's conservative by nature, as most of them are. So get that lead, rely on that talent to get that lead, and then sort of step on the gas at that point.
Yeah.
Again,
what were you going to say?
Very different scenario this weekend.
The first 2 possessions for Wisconsin of the second half, they ran 4 times for 0 yards and gave themselves 3rd and long situations in both in both cases. Punted on the first one, but then 3rd and 15. What was interesting to me defensively is obviously the fake punt went into it on that first drive. But Penn State was getting what they wanted on 3rd down in the first half. Not
they just weren't converting.
Correct.
That was just that was the point I was going to make, Nate. Is perfectly put. They were getting everything they wanted from the beginning of the game onward. The defensive line was dominant against the run. Kobe King was great, and they were getting a lot of tackles and 3rd and longs. It's just that they were kind of short-circuiting on 3rd down early in the game, and then they came and put the clamps on. And the statistical average of you're not going to convert that many 3rd and longs if you're Wisconsin, and they just stopped in the second half because Penn State. The one thing I would say is there was a little more zone on that first drive. They started playing more man. That led to some of those conversions late in the second half, where they played their fastball, is how I viewed it.
I just this transcends seasons though, and defensive coordinators. So that like that to me, that's kind of interesting is if you look back at last year's Michigan game, the Ohio State game, Penn State had the same situation. That Penn State very frequently got itself into defensively, got itself into advantageous third down situations and couldn't get off the field. And so that kind of rearing its head at Wisconsin, at least in the first half, you know, and a couple times this season, honestly, has surprised me a little bit that has not necessarily rectified itself.
This is the BWI Live Show. I'm Thomas Ryan Carr, Sean Fitz, Nate Bauer. This is the premier Penn State football talk show anywhere in the world. And I've looked around. I haven't found anybody better. Speaking of premier, cheesesteaks and beer, Fitz, you cannot put a better combination together. So if you're going to come downtown for Ohio State, first off, you should get here Friday because you'll still be in traffic by the time the game starts at noon. But if you get here early enough, you can grab a spot at Anti-Fragile. This is the week that if you're going to go, you need to be there at noon, hang out, and have a good time. Because I know that's what we do on Fridays, right, Fitz?
We do. Our kids are off school this week, are off school Thursday and Friday, which is going to throw a wrench in the plans. But I will be honest, I've taken my kids in there several times. We go upstairs, sit on the couch, they play on their iPads, and we drink beer. It's pretty great. I'm not going to lie. The whole thing is pretty great. Anti-Fragile came here in April of 2022 and really kind of changed the beer scene downtown in State College. So we appreciate their support. They have been big supporters of us. We are big supporters of them. Stop in. Tell them the podcast sent you. I cannot tell you how many people have come up that work there and say, hey, we appreciate their business, because apparently if you listen to this show, you must be a good tipper. So we appreciate that as well. But they've got kombucha. They've got all kinds of beer. I had a porter last week that was fantastic, and a hazy, just all over the place right now. Paulo's doing some great work, their head brewer there. I think you'll have the ability to sit outside this week. We only got a couple of weeks like that left in State College. So they do have outdoor seating. Of course, the cheesesteaks are phenomenal. Great little spot.
And you'll be sitting right next to the cheesesteaks. So you need to grab one or else you're going to be hungry the whole time smelling it.
Yeah, the smell is pretty enticing there. And also, Nate's lovely wife joined us the other day. She brought in her own food. The cheesesteaks are wonderful, but if you're not a cheesesteak person, you can take your own food in there and eat. Not only do they say that's okay, they encourage it, because that's kind of how they roll. So come in, mixed drinks, beers, kombucha, hard kombucha, non-alcoholic drinks, stateside sodas, Surfside. So they've got kind of everything that you're looking for. So if you're downtown this weekend and you can find parking, please stop by and tell them the BWI podcast sent you.
Yeah, and better yet, if you can get a ride downtown and leave parking for people that aren't going to be having one of these coffee martinis, that's a good one. Nate, one of the things I love, and this is just quickly because we got to get on to the next thing, but I can't stop talking about Anti-Fragile. What you saw there on screen, I had that coffee martini. Oh, they use local ingredients, including places like Rothrock Coffee, who should also be a sponsor of the show, by the way, because they are a sponsor of my breakfast every single day. They have amazing products that they put into. They source the best quality stuff locally, and I know that's very important to you, somebody who is a taste aficionado.
I do like things that taste good. Listen, let me go back a second. I cannot have you guys slandering downtown State College parking. This has to stop. It's fine. There are parking garages. There is ample parking in downtown State College. I will not have it. It discourages people from venturing into the downtown space, and they need to. Downtown State College is a great place. It is. You can walk a little bit. You might not get right up next to the establishment that you're trying to go to, but go. I'm telling you, it's not that big of a deal. Hit the parking garages. Pew Street has one. McAllister Deck. Anyway, I'm done.
Listen, the Chamber of Commerce commercials start next month. So save that energy for next month. I need you to bottle that. Okay.
Hey, and by the way, speaking of that, Anti-Fragile accepted the Award for Emerging Business of 2024 by the Chamber of Business and Industry Center of Industry of Center County. So an award-winning business in works with us here at BWI.
Yeah, and by the way, that was not a joke. The Chamber of Commerce is going to be joining us next week. So if you're a local business in State College, there's a lot of people to work with, including the Chamber of Commerce. We'll be getting that to you next. But right now, next is Fitz's recruiting update. So it's Ohio State week. We've been talking about this since the too many W teams, the West Virginia week. So Ryan Snyder's been working on this for a long time. BlueWhiteIllustrated.com if you want to go and check out all the information about who's going to be there. But Fitz is going to give you some of the high-level stuff, including some of the most recent recruiting news. So Fitz, since the last time we talked on Thursday, what's been going on with Penn State recruiting?
Yeah, it's a huge week. And it's it's the smaller of the next 2 weeks because the whiteout is the one that's going to be more conducive to getting guys there. Start time, I don't want to say opponent because everybody wants to go to the Ohio State game, but everybody also wants to go to the whiteout. And for Penn State coaches, you probably push them to the Washington game. I don't think that's a disrespect to Washington, but you think about the circumstances of a noon kick against the biggest opponent on the schedule. It presents a lot of challenges. Now that recruiting staff is very good. They do a really good job at getting guys and making them feel like they've gotten the attention that they deserve. But yeah, it's going to be a tough crunch on Saturday, but still a very good list shaping up. Ryan Snyder put up his first look on Friday, mostly 2026, 2027 prospects. It looks good. I mean, if everything comes to, I'm sorry for going back to the traffic and parking thing of this, but if everybody gets there and everybody's able to get parked and get situated, looks like a very good list. Guys like Sean Austin, the 4-star running back from Ohio. He's going to be up. Whitey Collier, defensive end from Philly, is a guy that I really like. David Davis. He's a heck of a football player from Pittsburgh. I still don't know what position he is. He's a great running back, and Penn State recruited him as a running back, but might be better safety. And
interesting.
What's that?
I just said interesting. I hadn't heard that. That's interesting.
He does everything so well. And if you talk to people in Pittsburgh, he's just one of those guys that's an all-around football player and kind of similar in that Quentin Martin. He's not as big as Quentin, but he's kind of similar in that mold where he can definitely make things happen with the ball in his hand, but also, in deep coverage, he can find the football and it's tough.
Good physical player too.
What's that?
He's 5'10", we haven't listed at 5'10", 180, but he plays big. He's a good physical player, which makes the safety conversation make sense in my mind. Just surprised to hear that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut off.
He's been a 4-4 guy. So he's one of those guys. I think you try and take him as soon as you can and then try and figure out where he's going to play. So Davis is a guy that I'm a big fan of. He's having a really good year. He was hurt last year, so having a really good year. Tyler Merrill's going to be back, of course, from Cumberland Valley, the big offensive lineman. Really interesting guy yesterday added to the list. Favor Aki from Delaware, Ohio, so not far from Columbus. We have him ranked, I believe, 71st in the class of 2026. He's an emerging prospect. I think we're higher on him than anybody right now, but we're just kind of getting a jump on there. He's got some athletic qualities that you really like. So that list is coming together. Ryan has been putting some stuff up. I haven't looked to see what his latest additions have been, but they've been very good. I will say, again, next weekend, probably a little bit more dense in terms of talent, but for a noon kick, I know it's Ohio State, but for a noon kick, getting all these guys here is a really good shot for Penn State. So these next 2 weeks are vital for Penn State, not just in the 2025 class flipping. I had a notebook this morning, just definitely check that out. But not just for 2025, but for 2026 and 27 to set the expectation for these guys moving forward.
So quickly, to tell people where to go for all of that, subscribe right now. We got a big game sale going on. Promo code JOIN50 for 50% off of BlueWhiteIllustrated.com's annual price. That locks you in from now, probably until the next whiteout or the next game with a big opponent. So you'll have all of that access, including the offseason, transfer portal, signing day, spring football, commit season for 26 and beyond, and of course, most of the 2025 season. So this is a great time to subscribe to Blue White Illustrated, and it's just for 50% off. So you can read all that information, and you can give yourself an early Halloween present for next year as well. Fitz, when it comes to it's the whiteout game, the time, all those things, do they have more time to spend with those recruits at the game that has a later date? Not just that it's easier to get players into town. Is there a little more time and a little more breathing room? Or does it not matter because there's going to be hundreds of them on the sideline for the game against Washington for the whiteout?
Yeah, in case you missed it, it's either going to be a 3:30 or a primetime kick. I believe 8 o'clock was the listed time for Washington. That's going to be on the 6-day hold, which everybody loves. I know. But yes, it regardless of which slot that's in, yes, it makes a difference because you have more time to sort of sit in the recruiting lounge or take these guys, they get them on golf carts. They run them around the tailgate lots to show them what, this kind of atmosphere is like. if you're crunched in, I mean, even if you show up at 8:00 for a noon kick, you're still up against it. So playing later definitely helps. It's also gives you on the front end. So if you got a guy that's coming in from out of region, he doesn't have a game next Friday, he can come in and he can stay in Altoona or somewhere that he can afford to stay, because State College is ridiculous with hotels. But you can come in Friday, check some things out, go back to wherever you're staying, and then come back on Saturday. It gives you the flexibility to do that. So I think it's more conducive. It's more helpful for everybody. And of course, the night game atmosphere, the whiteout atmosphere, is tough to match. So I think that's the preference for the staff, is to come the next weekend. But if you can't come next weekend, you want to come this weekend, they're going to have you this weekend too, because it's a big one. So,
right.
But I mean, you don't want to say it. It's not Joe canceling official visits before 05, was it Ohio State or whatever it was. It's like, you're going to get the attention, but also have to realize what's going on and what the primary objective here is, and that's to beat Ohio State. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. It's going to be a big weekend, and it's going to be a very big weekend on the back end of this big weekend. So big weekends, big time to join Blue White Illustrated. Check us out.
Absolutely. Something that I noticed you tweeted about, and I'm curious to get your conversation here on the show about this particular player on a team that is very good right now. That is Gavin Sidwar. He's decommitted from Rutgers, as you pointed out. That official announcement, I think, came this weekend or on Monday. I apologize, I don't have the timeline cemented in my head. But what do you think is interesting about that location with LaSalle and Penn State, and a guy who is clearly rising in the class of 2026? What do you got going on here in terms of what you know about Gavin Sidwar and the interest and all those things?
Yeah, I think he's a good prospect, no doubt about it. I've seen him in person. He throws a pretty good ball, but when he gets out on the field in the pads, that's when it really happens for him. LaSalle is loaded, so I mean, it's a great opportunity for him to put up numbers and things like that. I think he's a really good player. We have him as a 4-star at on 3. Very curious to see if there's any interest there. I've heard not much based on what was out there to begin with, but then again, he was committed to Rutgers. He seemed all in on Rutgers until he wasn't. So things can change in that recruitment. I think he's looking for something maybe a little bit more national. The other side to this is Penn State's got Troy Huhn, and they love Troy Huhn. Right. Troy Huhn's their number one guy. Like that is not changing. The only way that changes, I think, is if Troy decides that change, and there's really no evidence that that's going to happen either. So I'm very curious to see how this plays out with Sidwar. I know James Franklin followed him on Twitter the other day. It makes perfect sense for Penn State to show some sort of interest, whether that means hosting him for a game or whatever. But I think that's more of a cover your bases type thing than hey, he's back on the market, so we're going to see what he's got. So again, very, very good player. I'm confident though that Penn State really likes what it has in Troy Huhn.
Yeah. It's just an interesting situation with the Pennsylvania quarterback that has now some national recognition from On 3, and of course is playing very well. So fans always want to know about the local players and how they would fit into a class, like a la Bo Perbula, Drew Allar, with a guy that's a top tier quarterback and a guy who's also, a top tier quarterback based on the rankings, not a 1-for-1 comparison, but always good to know. And as that situation develops, as always, another reason to subscribe to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for more than 2 months. Get in for the full year so you know how these stories develop over time. So you're not here going, well, you said a year ago, blah, blah, blah. Things change. And as they change, we give you the new information, and you need to have that. Speaking of how things change, how is Penn State's team going to look against Ohio State, given the injuries that they sustained last week? We're going between the lines with head coach James Franklin from his Monday press conference.
They have both gotten reps with runs.
Bringing back noted James Franklin whisperer and interpreter Nate Bauer for this particular segment, we are focusing not almost entirely. It's going to only diverge from the conversation around injuries is if one of these two guys brings up something from James Franklin's press conference, or if you ask a question in the chat. We're talking about Drew Allar, Dani Dennis-Sutton, and Anthony Dokoh today and their status heading into the game. James Franklin provided what I guess you would call an injury update, even though it was more conversation about timelines and things like that. So Nate, which player would you like to start with when we talk about James Franklin and his comments from yesterday?
Drew.
All right.
I think he's played enough football for us that timeline will go all the way up to the game, really. I do think from a practice perspective, we're going to have to, no matter where we're at on Tuesday, we're going to have to get both of those guys reps Tuesday and Wednesday. But it's too early to tell at this point. But he's played enough football that I think that decision will go all the way up to game time.
Nate, go with it. What do we need to know about what James Franklin said here?
Okay, two things. The first is our kudos to our colleagues on the beat who ask those questions for reframing the conversation. Because if you ask James Franklin directly about status, he's not going to tell you. If you ask him about the way that the questions were asked yesterday, and all three were asked in the same vein of, can you wait until game time effectively to make a decision? How much practice do they need to be a part of before you make a call? It ends up yielding some decent insight.
It only took us 10 years, Nate, but here we are.
Listen, I can't critique, but I can.
No, I agree.
Offer kudos, so that was good.
Yeah.
Because it did yield results. And the point that I would key in on from yesterday, which was kind of part of your clip, but also kind of not, is talking about getting them ready, right? And so need to have. He thinks that you're going to have to prepare both guys, meaning Drew and Bo, on Tuesday and Wednesday, more or less intimating that Drew is expected to practice this week. And then later in the press conference, and this is the one, is talking about Ethan Grunkmeyer, where Franklin said, quote, "There's only so many reps to go around. So if Drew is able to practice and we're going to get reps to Bo, it's hard to now also get reps to the third guy. Blah, 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 blah." Quote, "So it probably won't change a whole lot is what I'm saying based on the information I have right now." All right.
Yeah.
If that's the case, and you're not going to, right? I think.
So what you're saying is that the information on Monday, after all of the stuff Sunday or Monday morning that they did in terms of tests and diagnosis, is that the expectation would be Drew is going to practice at the very least at early in the week.
Something to that. It immediately eliminates long-term. Long-term's not on the table. And two, if nothing is changing for Grunkmeyer, then that means at minimum, Allar is not right now precluded from playing,
right?
Which is what he said in the first place. But I'm just like, there's reinforcement there to say, okay, Drew Allar is not in a condition that eliminates his potential to participate in Saturday's game.
Let's move. Fitz, do you have anything you want to add here? I know you're doing the Lord's work in the chat, so I don't want to
doing the chat stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on then to Dani Dennis-Sutton, the other former 5-star player, starter, very important player that got injured and then could not play in the second half against Wisconsin. James Franklin provided another timeline in terms of a lot of this comes down to trust in the player. Do you think that they're going to make the right plays without having to go over it as many times as some of the young players in practice? That's the framing of the conversation here from James Franklin, which I'll just let him say it now that I basically spelled it out.
Dani will have the ability to play in this game. He's played a ton of football. He's super mature. He's very intelligent. He's thoughtful. He's hardworking. He's been in the training room the last 2 days. Every time I've gone down there, he's down there. So same thing. We'll go right up to game time to see kind of where we're at with things. If he's able to go, he'll go. But if not, we have a ton of confidence in those other guys as well. And then I think you guys saw we played Max as well, so we'll be prepared to play Max this week.
I find it interesting that in this conversation, and you mentioned, like, what's the way to get the conversation out of James Franklin? One where he can say, yeah, it's going to be a game time decision, Ryan Day. You're going to have to prepare for everything all the way up until Saturday at 11 a.m. But I think the conversation also is honest in terms of where we are in the week and all that stuff. So, Nate, am I on the right track there, or what did he say there that interests you as far as reading between the lines?
Yeah, I'm not sure that is it an advantage for Penn State for the opponent to not know about the quarterback in this case? Absolutely. I think, right? They're just dramatically different styles. And if Drew is not able to play at all, Ohio State will be chasing ghosts this week, right? Just spending time on preparing for a quarterback that has no potential to play. Dani is a little bit different. And yeah, you're going to game plan for him, but you also have to game plan for that position no matter what, right? They're just players at that spot behind him that will also be challenging. So I don't know that it reaches the same level of gamesmanship, but also, yeah, see how it goes, right? It's the same deal as Drew in the sense of, I think they're effectively saying the expectation is that they should be able to play. You have seen this year guys who do get up to game time and it's not quite right and have to pull the plug and it doesn't work out. But at this moment, they're going to proceed as though Dani Dennis-Sutton will be part of the game plan. And if he's not, they feel comfortable with their backup plan, right? Yeah. They feel good about what they have there.
Fitz, I want to come to you with the backup plan, talking about Max Granville playing and being part of that depth chart. I do think it's interesting when you've got Jalen Harvey and Max Granville and you're choosing between redshirt freshmen, it's Max Granville that they're playing. Is that just because of the pass rushing situation and like you're going to use him as a situational pass rusher? Is that the conversation? And Harvey is more of a balanced player from a size and strength, et cetera, perspective?
So if you think back 2 years to receiver, Amari Evans got on the field early, right? He was the one out of that group that got out of the field early. Why? Because he can run past everyone because he's really fast. Because you're not asking him to do much. So Max is not going to hold up against the run game. Like he's not going to play 40 snaps and hold up against the run game. But if you need him off the edge to just go get the quarterback, that's what he can do. Like there's some snap there. There's some pop in him off the edge. But no, I think that's what you're seeing there. The main backup plan is going to be Amin and Smith-Filbert. Like if, I think it's going to be more balanced reps this week. Amin, I don't think played well in the first half of the season. I think he played pretty well against Wisconsin. So hopefully that's coming back into form for him. Smith was out there quite a bit. He's, I think he's still feeling through some things. And when he's one of those guys, when he does hit, it looks really good. There's some times when he does look a little bit lost. So I'm not disagreeing with Nate, but Dani's presence is greatly needed this weekend, I believe.
Especially against an offensive line that is in dire straits right now.
Yeah,
go ahead.
That's the thing. Like Ohio State's offensive line is in a situation where, so Penn State's got a lot of injuries here, no doubt about it. They're kind of spread out. Like, so you can kind of take a guy here and a guy there, and it still hurts the overall product. But at the same time, it's not all in one particular unit. We kind of thought we were heading that way at linebacker earlier this year, and then they kind of recouped and found their way. This is different. This is losing a starting left tackle who's probably your best offensive lineman in Josh Simmons for the year, replacing him with a guy that wasn't nearly that. And also, when I say wasn't nearly that, it's probably the most positive thing that has been said about him in the last couple of weeks. And then he gets hurt. So what happens there? Do you, if this is Penn State, you move JB Nelson there or something like that. So I think that Ohio State's going to counteract by moving a guard out and then trying to fill that guard spot because they understand what's on the other side of that. So I'm very curious to see, and this is an argument that I made on the site at Blue White Illustrated, is Ohio State doesn't call the game to counteract some of the stuff that other teams do because they are so talented, because they are overwhelming in so many aspects. Penn State's got a degree of that because you look at the teams that get the ball out so quickly against Penn State for a reason to keep their defensive line on. Penn State really doesn't deal with that, because they have the overall talent level. Ohio State has the overall talent level every week. So you call that game, and I said with a type of play calling hubris that you can get it done because you have that kind of talent.
I love it.
Does that run counteractive to what you have to do to sort of negate this defensive line? And does that, on the flip side, help Penn State's defensive line break through and maybe play a more normal game? Does that make sense? Because right now you're playing a 2-second and go game, and that clearly impacts the quarterback receiver timing. There's a bunch of drops in the last
it didn't work last week against Nebraska. Ohio State tried to play their game with that offensive line, and when the receivers got down the field and Will Howard had time to find them within the structure of the play, it was not good for Nebraska. But when he didn't have time, it doesn't matter if you can get open 20 yards down the field, you can't get them the football, and there was a lot of that going on in that Nebraska game. I think that I do want to move on quickly because I want to get to the mailbag, and I apologize for cutting you off there, Fitz. The last thing is Anthony Dokoh, and Nate, I want to bring you back in for this one because this one I think provides some more insight, some more nuance that we need from you as to what James Franklin is saying and who he's saying it to in that regard.
Yeah, so obviously I don't think Anthony's in the same category of those guys in terms of just the number of games he's played in. I mean, he's really a first-year starter this year. Both Dani and Drew are multiple-year starters now, so it's a little bit different. We've already been playing Rucci a bunch anyway, but we're going to need both of those guys. So, living in the training room, and I think there's also really, for all of our players, there's that maturation process that I think a lot of times comes from the players of figuring out what can you play with and should you play with and what can't you. And guys have to figure that out. That's part of maturity and growth as a football player. Obviously, ultimately, the medical people will step in there when a guy can't play. But I'm talking about the guys that can play that have to kind of figure out how to play with those bumps and bruises and things like that. So that's where that leadership is really.
Nate, I've got a pretty strong opinion about Anthony Dokoh and the right tackle situation. So my mind goes one way, but I think other people heard that and it's heard something different. What did you hear?
I think that you and I are more closely aligned than.
Okay.
I think that a lot of people interpreted it as kind of a shot at Anthony Dokoh.
Suck it up. Like, you got to suck it up. Yeah.
And I don't think that's the case. I think that Anthony Dokoh has been sucking it up.
Yes.
Right. Has been playing through some stuff effectively all year. Right. I mean, even dating back to the end of spring practice, he was a scratch in the blue-white game. So clearly this is a kid who has been trying to play, and I think that it is probably open to conversation and maybe some criticism of how effective he's been able to be on the backside of playing through that stuff. And that to me, the most important line in anything that James Franklin said there was, what can you play with and should you play with, and what can't you? And the question for Anthony Dokoh and for Penn State as a coaching staff is his ability to communicate to the coaching staff where he's at physically in a way that is truthful and honest. Because go back to that James Franklin's post game at Wisconsin saying that he really demanded of Drew honesty, like be very, very honest. How effective can you be? And Drew told him not.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's the bottom line here is as a third-year player who had built up that cachet of trust, Drew was able to feel comfortable enough, even though I'm sure it killed him to not be back out there on that field. He felt like he could play through it. To be honest and say, no, I'm not going to be at that level. Is Anthony Dokoh in the same boat? I think so. Can you play through it? Yeah, maybe.
I don't think.
Is it going to be very, very challenging and leave you at a, create some disadvantages for your team? Is there the potential for that? Yeah. And that's what Penn State is trying to figure out. And that's what Anthony Dokoh is trying to figure out.
Anthony Dokoh, remember Monday of last week or Tuesday of last week? I asked James Franklin on Monday, how explosive are you most explosive run blockers, and how much does that change the offense? in your favor. And he talked about Venga Ioane. Anthony Donkoh was the most explosive pass blocker or run blocker, on this team. After he got hurt against UCLA, that is now out of the equation. And they have been scheming and playing around that injury. And you can't do that. Like, you can't sustain that long term. In that first half, he was giving up pressure before he left the game with a separate injury, I might add. So is he effectively helping your team? Ryan says, can we win without Donkoh? I'm not convinced we can. I'm not convinced you can win with him in the game because he's not healthy and he's not actually doing the things you need of him to succeed as an offense. And we're going to get into this all week long. My opinion on the factors in this game that lead to Penn State the best possible outcome on offense. The right tackle position and the quarterback are linked together. You cannot have a bad situation in both of those places, and we'll see how that goes throughout the next couple of days as they prepare for the game against Ohio State. But here's one thing that I'm not going to do ever again, guys. And that is when we go to Wednesday practice, I'm not going to say, well, Anthony Dokoh looks healthy. Nick Singleton looks healthy when they're going through jog throughs because they look healthy when they're going 50%. If all they can give is 50%, they're going to look fine because they looked fine last week. And Anthony Dokoh was anything but fine. Let's get to the mailbag. We got a ton of questions. We got to preview Ohio State, and we got to close out the show with some of the. There is a huge backlog of some of these super chats in the chat, and I want to make sure everyone gets their time. I don't normally like slander, even of people that we all agree like can be frustrating at times. But C. Paul King says, please boycott Big Noon Kickoff. Raise your hand if you hate Fox Sports and its loudmouth announcer. But he did come back and correct his spelling. And I wanted to just give him the opportunity because I've been there, C. Paul King. Everyone's seen my graphics and titles and headlines. So when somebody makes a mistake, I just want everyone to know, like, it's all right. It's all right. But, Big Noon Kickoff, everyone is bummed from the recruiting conversation that we had that this is a noon kick. I understand that. I get that. And I want to just allow people to voice their frustration. This is also says, Steven, it's Rucci Redux time. He's going to be in the game, and that is where we're going to start here from Penn State 2012. He says, if Donkoh can't play, would you use a tight end to help Nolan Rucci? Here's the thing, guys. I'm using a tight end to help either tackle. I'm using chips, running backs, anything I can to help out that tackle situation, especially if Allar is the starting quarterback. Fitz, how do you feel about that, given the opponent on the other side as well? Is that something you would be doing no matter what in this game against Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau?
Yeah, I think the the trauma is real when you talk about Ohio State defensive ends sort of torturing Penn State in this series in the last decade or so. So I don't know about a tight end. I think a lot's going to be put on the running backs this week in terms of what they're able to do, which of course is going to trickle down into you're not going to get as many targets, catches, things like that for Katron and Nick Singleton. Katron, by the way, 4 catches the other night. Did not see that one coming. So I think that's where it plays out. If you get to it, maybe you keep a guy in, but you look at what Penn State's done with the tight end. It's not necessarily like 6 guys up front anymore. It's move that tight end around, especially with Tyler Warren, move him all over the place, and you're not using him to block. Khalil Dinkins, I thought, played really well against Wisconsin. He got the touchdown, but you look at the Katron touchdown. He's the one that sprung that with his blocking. So if you need a guy, that might be the guy. And I don't think you're going to ask a true freshman and Luke Reynolds to stay in there and try and block JTT. So I think that there's potential for that, but feel it out, see how it goes, and if you have to adjust, then adjust on the fly.
Yeah, I think that the position in general, if you're saying it's got to be a double team, the way that James Franklin talked about Abdul Carter getting double teams. If you're going to be leaving a tight end, you've got to make sure that you're adding more value than you're taking away in the pass pattern, because then against a 3 safety defense, you only have 4 eligible receivers. That is them having an advantage. Right. Eric asked this question of you. He says, we got guys like KJ Winston and Olu Fashanu, but should Penn State be doing a better job recruiting within the WCAC? DeMatha, St. Joe's Catholic, Good Counsel, Gonzaga are stacked. What do you think of the recruiting in that Washington area Catholic league?
So I think the effort's still there, but I do think there can be better results. And I'm glad he asked this earlier because I'm going through some of the WCAC stuff, and there's a lot of guys that are kind of just out of the reach. You look in the 2025 class, a guy like Tariq Hayers, who's a good player at St. John's. He's going to Rutgers. You've got Pitt commits, West Virginia commits. Bud Coombs was a guy that was on the radar early. He's going to go to Maryland. But those guys, when push comes to shove, really didn't have the option to go to Penn State. Now, they missed on Kanoa Winston. Like, I think that's the big one right here in the class of 2025. You obviously look at the makeup of Penn State's class. You'd love to have another safety. You'd love to have another Winston. And he seems pretty solid to Michigan as well. I don't think they were really ever in it for Fahim Delane, the guy that was really the marquee player in 2025. So I look at that and say, yes, I think there was effort there. I think there's a lot of offers out there. I'm curious, Grant Grayton, a Minnesota commit at Good Counsel, is a good looking player. So is that a guy that you circle back around to? But on the whole, guys that they've had the opportunity to get, it hasn't happened in the form of Winston, but I don't think it's for lack of overall effort. They were down there during the first bye week. They stopped in at all the schools. They do that. They've got a commitment in the 2026 class from LeVar Keys at DeMatha. And I think that maybe it comes back to that a little bit as well. You look at the 2025 class at DeMatha, which is where Penn State kind of has done the best out of that group. I know they've gotten Olu from Gonzaga, and there's been guys from Good Counsel. There's been guys from a bunch of different schools down there. But DeMatha is kind of the wheelhouse there because a lot of the things align, going back to the guys that they got, Shane Simmons, all those guys, the style kinds of aligns the most out of that. You got styles that align with like Michigan at Gonzaga. We saw that with Evan Link going there and of course, Kanoa Winston going there, but DeMatha is kind of the wheelhouse, I guess it would be. And it's just not offering it in the class of 2025. Now, again, he's in 2026. There's a couple of guys down there in that cycle. Carter Meadows was on campus for the last game, which would be UCLA. He's a big target. I'm very intrigued by Tariq Boney at St. John. He is a really productive edge rusher who's just not going to be that size. I think he's about 6'1.5", maybe 6'1". So he's going to be an interior guy. He's going to be visiting this weekend. He's one of those guys that I think could be on the line. But yeah, I mean, it's there's always going to be talent down there. And what's interesting to me in looking at the WCAC, it's not always the big time guys that hit. So maybe playing this way that they've played the 2025, where there's a bunch of guys with quote unquote offers, but there's only 3-4 guys that have the opportunity to jump on the offer, and then everybody below that with the check mark beside their name, those guys could turn into really good players just because of the way that they cultivate, they do things so well down there. And it's a really well-structured, you got a bunch of really well-structured programs. So I think they could do better. I think the results definitely would leave a little bit to be desired, but I don't think it's like a disaster area or anything like that. Yeah. Very intrigued to see how Maryland goes in the next couple of years. If Mike Locksley hangs on, if they decide to make a change, how does that change? Because not only are you taking Locksley out, who's made a lot of these kids feel welcome there at Maryland, but also like there's going to be a new coach bump. So how does that work? So I think there's a lot that goes on at these schools, but yeah, for the most part, those private schools down there are places that you should be cultivating if you're Penn State. Yes, the recent results haven't really been there.
Steven Shengaris asked this in a chat. He says, do we think Allar is a knee or an ankle? The Brace Saturday night says knee, but don't know. This is another great reason to go to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com and use the promo code 50% off with promo code JOIN50, because Nate did this little thing called reporting, and he's got some of the answers over there at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. So Nate, I'm not asking, just finish the promo for me. Give a little teaser, a little morsel, so people know nothing, but also are intrigued by what you have over there.
Sign up.
Perfect. All right, let's go on to this one. Spitty082 says, who needs to have a better performance for a Penn State victory, offense or defense in this game? Nate, coming to you. Offense or defense?
Offense.
Okay. The need to score points, I imagine, is what you're saying, is that you're expecting the defense to play well either way. And is that the nuance to your point there? Or is it just offense equals wins?
I think that Ohio State's defense is going to, I don't think that there's any real question about this, is the toughest that Penn State will have played. this season, probably will see this season. And so points are going to be at a premium. Possessions are going to be at a premium. Mistakes, you have to keep to a minimum. And I don't know that we have seen that version of this offense from Penn State consistently this season. And so, yeah, like maybe Ohio State, like, I don't know about you guys. I'm kind of expecting a low scoring game. And I think that for Penn State to finish on the winning side of that, it cannot play the style of game it has played really for the last 2 seasons, right? You need more of that 2021 version that was it 21 or 22? 22 that was
20.
In the mid 30s.
Yeah.
Like you're going to have to score some points. You're going to have to generate some offense and do some things that I think this Penn State offense is capable of doing. It just has to do it a little bit more consistently than it has so far this season. If they can string second half USC, second half Wisconsin, right into this type of matchup, then they're probably going to have some success and have an opportunity to win.
Stephen Changaris back with another great point. He says, wake up and watch T. Frank on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Forget the network host. We're on 9 a.m. outside the Bryce Jordan Center. We're going to be snuggled right between the big noon and game day, I imagine. So if you can find us, we're in this, I assume we're going to be in the same spot outside the Bryce Jordan Center ticket office. There will be about 14,000 network trucks in front of us. Gone are the days where we had barbecue in front of us. So just pick your way through all the cables and all the metal and all the wiring and all of that stuff and come say hi to me in Landon. 9 a.m. Of Ohio State Saturday.
T. Frank live from the BJC boiler room is what I'm expecting. They're just gonna whisk you guys down the basement. Yeah.
If I have a better, like, all I need is to make sure I have a strong internet connection so we can do it. And if it's from the boiler room, it has to be from the boiler.
The Jordan Center always has a strong Wi-Fi connection. Everybody knows this.
Of course. We are 8286 says, do you feel this game is prime for a Penn State victory given it's a home game? Plus, both teams are going to feel each other out in the first half, and whoever makes the second. Oh my goodness, what happened to my reading skills? I read this 3 times before the show today. Basically, slow first half, second half adjustments. Feels like it favors Penn State from We Are 8286. Fitz, do you agree with that? Because that's the opposite of what Nate just said.
Again, I'm not buying into the second half adjustment type thing. Like, I think it's about the execution and the basic defense that they're going to be able to play. I think there's a lot here in terms of what Nate said about the offense, about making that extra play, about doing the things where they don't shoot themselves in the foot and compound mistakes, as we talked about earlier. So I don't know how much feeling there is. I hate that, to be honest with you. Like, first off, as analysis, it sucks. It's me. But I hate that you go into this game and you kind of want to see why would Penn State coach this to be a tight game? Like, that is the mindset. That's the mental hurdle that I have to get over. And I kind of think that's why Andy Kotelnicki is there. And I kind of hope that's what we see on Saturday, is just kind of go out and go for it. Joe Moorhead did a fantastic job of this. It was not a situation where, the micro was taking over for the big picture. And the big picture was they just want to score points. And I think the team that can score on back-to-back possessions can make a big difference in the end score line here, is to string a couple of possessions together, whether that be a 3-play drive or a 10-play drive, it doesn't matter. But to put 14 points up in one quarter can just be, that can change the entire game.
Let's see. Sure, go for it.
Can I just weigh in here real quick? And this is a line that I love to use, and it might actually be stupid, but I'm going to say it anyway. Penn State needs to go into this game being willing to lose by 30 points. Like, they have to be willing to play. It's not about playing scared. It's not about it's
deferring. I call it deferring winning till the fourth quarter.
Well,
are you saying like they need to be aggressive from the very beginning and try and maximize points first quarter on?
you can't play the way that you just reverse engineer a lot of the games that Penn State has played against lesser teams this year. Illinois played that style of you're just trying to get to the fourth quarter, and then you see how things shake out. Penn State can't play that way in this game because it's not one, the injuries are significant and I think put Penn State at a disadvantage. It's not to say that Ohio State doesn't have its own situations to work out. They do. But I think that Penn State offensively, that is why Andy Kotelnicki was brought into the program, was to create big plays. They didn't have it the past couple of years. They have to connect on those, but not only do they have to connect on those, they have to try them.
You saying they have to take more of them in this game? You can't have a 16-play drive.
You're not going to do it.
If you can end a drive with a touchdown on play 9, but you might also throw an interception, you're saying like that's the risk you have to take in this game?
That is
part without your receiver throwing the pass. But anyway, go.
Yeah, right.
The complicating part of that is one, certainly Nick Singleton's health is something that is part of this conversation, and his ability to go 80 is in question right now. I'm not sure. I don't think anybody can really deny that. But the second part is that something that Bo Pribula can do? Is that an element?
Stop right there. We're going to get into the next question because that is a great transition. This is Bruno Sotanum says there seems to be a consensus out there that Bo Pribula's style of play is better matched specifically against Ohio State, regardless of health. Do you agree? And can you explain why that would be true? You're saying the opposite of this, that Bo Pribula, you are not sure if he provides you those explosive plays, or am I mischaracterizing what you just said?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly what I'm saying is okay. I don't know that he has the ability to beat you over the top. And that's, to me, part of this conversation. And I know that Ohio State makes that difficult. That is something that Ohio State doesn't allow to happen. But I think you're asking Bo Pribula more to do the style of patience and, yes, with his legs can keep you off balance, and he is worth a chunk run here and there, and he will deliver 12 to 18-yard passes. Like, those are in his wheelhouse. He did it on Saturday night. He is capable of doing that. He demonstrated on Saturday night. He is capable of fitting the ball into tight windows. He's fine as a passer. Can he beat you over the top? I don't know if that's there, if that's his strength, if that's something that Penn State wants to do with him.
This is Lambda sums it up pretty well. I think Bo can open up explosive run plays. Drew can open up explosive passing plays. Bo also opens up normal run plays, as opposed to Drew's situation, which is a combination of a couple of different factors. And this is the other half of that conversation, Fitz. And these two questions fit well together like peanut butter and chocolate. So we're going to get to this one here for you. Ear to the Ground says, I think it's safe to assume that even if Allar plays, he will pose zero threat of a run keep option. Doesn't need to be a runner, but there have been a few times in the games where he's been effective and helped the offense. There have been also times that he has been less than that so far this year from what I've seen on film. Do you think Penn State would attempt to scheme around a clear lack of mobility from Allar? I guess the question is, how do you fit the run game with Allar with a bum leg and a situation with the offensive line and the running back, and trying to eke out some efficiency there with Allar under center?
Yeah, it's almost, you almost have to go more to a power game, which I don't think is Penn State's specialty there. But yeah, I mean, they're going to have to mask it somehow, which I think is why you would see Bo regardless. Like,
yes,
I mean, Bo's tougher to prepare for. Like, that's not a shot at Drew, but like the diverse skill set there of him being able to run the football opens everything up for everything. It's basically about putting your safeties in conflict there, and that's when you can go over the top. And by the way, I'm not opposed to going over the top and just trying to get some calls. Like Davidson Igbosin. Oh, I knew I was going to trip up on that. Igbosin, the cornerback, is. Remember how we said about Joey Porter a couple of years ago? He likes to grab, and now he's getting caught for it. Yeah. Even though he was pretty good at it at one point, he's getting caught for it now. So you go over the top, you try and get some easy yardage that way. You're not necessarily going to complete the pass, but get some yardage, move down the field. Yeah. So I'm looking at that. I'm thinking Penn State's got an opportunity to maybe push the ball down the field. Ransom from Ohio State is going to play. I think he's going to be labeled as questionable, but that's a big deal because you're filling pieces at that point.
Yep.
From an injury standpoint. So I think there's a lot going on that could put Penn State in that direction. Again, I don't know that it's going to be the running game that gets it done, but they're going to have the opportunity to maybe establish a little bit more with Bo in the game.
There's a comment here in the chat that David Bortner says Allar 80%, Bo 20% of the snaps. You're forgetting Tyler Warren. They're going to run Tyler Warren on 7% of the snaps. So it's going to be, if you've got 3 quarterbacks, you've got none, but now you're going to have 3 quarterbacks doing 3 entirely separate things. The last thing I'll say, because I want to add in just one nugget. We're going to talk more about this tomorrow. We're going to dive deeper into some of the schematic things. But when Bo Pribula is in the game running that option, as Fitz said, it affects the safeties. There are fewer safeties deep. Therefore, there are more passing opportunities in the passing game that aren't as hard. Drew Allar operates the drop back passing game that uses the full field. What we saw of Bo Pribula is they were using classic college RPOs, some design stuff, and he had a couple of reads that he had to make, and he made the throw to Trey Wallace was a great read. But Allar does more of those things to generate explosive plays, and the run game affects the passing game directly for Bo Pribula, which made that second half a little bit easier. That, I think, would be the plan if Pribula was under center, even if he's taking some of the snaps because of Drew's situation. But, of course, we'll get into more of that tomorrow on the BWI Live Show with myself and Greg Pickle. We've got a wrestling show coming up this week. We've got a recruiting show coming up this week. We got a tailgate, a postgame show. There's a press conference, all kinds of stuff. Subscribe to Blue White Illustrated here on YouTube. And, of course, subscribe to the main site, the mecca of Penn State football information, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. 50% off with promo code JOIN50. Big game sale. Electricity is in the atmosphere. I'm Thomas Rankar for Sean Fitz and Nate Bauer. We will talk to you later on the BWI Live Show.